Hello, this is Judy Sarden, and thank you very much for joining me. I am unfortunately still a little bit under the weather, so please forgive me if I'm hacking a little bit. Been down for a couple of weeks, but I still wanted to make sure that I was here so that I could bring this this awesome workshop to you because the title of this group is How to Homeschool. So that's one of the things that I'm really hoping to deliver to people who are in this group. I help them out in figuring out how to homeschool and, more importantly, to answer your questions. And so if you're here, if you're new to the group, if you scroll through the videos, you may notice that I've done a couple of videos on where I'm answering a member question. And so if you are a member of this group, I want you to know that I'm here for you to answer your questions and to help you out. Often when we're members of various homeschool groups, you kind of put a question out there and hope someone will answer it. But we're striving to be different here in that you can post a question and you will actually get a live response via you can send me a messenger question, or the great thing to do is just put a question out here on the group, because when you do that, then I can answer that question for everybody, because oftentimes if you've got a question, other people have the same question. So just just know that I am here to answer any questions that you guys have. So we're going to give folks a little bit of time to get started while I pull up the document I'm going to be reading from. But I wanted to kind of introduce myself to people who are new. My name, again, is Judy Sarden, and I am the creator of this group, How to Homeschool. I homeschool my own children. I homeschool my two children. We are now in our 8th year of homeschooling, and my kids are in 5th and 7th grade. And it's been an awesome journey. I've homeschooled since my oldest was starting kindergarten. So we've been doing it for a while. And over the years, we have, we started off doing really school at home. And over the years, we have changed, we've evolved. And honestly, what I've ended up doing is really an eclectic mix. So I started off doing school at home, and we've kind of gone from school at home, where we're trying to replicate school at home. We've gone all the way to unschooling, and now we're kind of somewhere in between on the continuum. And so we have really found a rhythm that works really well for our family. I speak across the country. I speak with great homeschool conventions across the country. So you may have seen me in Missouri, or Cincinnati, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Greenville, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida. So I speak with the great homeschool conventions around the country. I'll be speaking with them this year. I will be speaking with them in April in Cincinnati. I'll be at their Cincinnati convention. And I will also be at the convention out in California. So it'll be awesome if you guys are in the area and come out and meet me, because I love meeting people who I meet on Facebook. It's always really cool to meet people in person. So I speak around the country. I talk about homeschool and education issues. I also talk about entrepreneurial issues. I was a corporate lawyer for 20 years before I started homeschooling the children. And so I've got a lot of business experience, a lot of business advisory role experience. And so I do some consulting, but my love is working with homeschooling families to help them on their homeschooling journey. Also, I've written the book, Sarden's Practical Guide, How to Start Homeschooling. And so in that guide, I've written it so that families who want to homeschool can just kind of cut through to the chase. For me, I'm kind of a practical girl. I'm just like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. A lot of the books are really thick, there's a lot of theory in there, but sometimes you just really want to know, okay, just tell me what to do, especially for families who are pulling their kids, especially their older kids, out of school, and they just really need to know, okay, what do I do next? And so for those families, my book is perfect because it literally tells you what to do. First look at your homeschool laws, here, set up your homeschool, this is how you do it. And so it's really a step-by-step guide to how to homeschool. And so I'm really excited about the book because, I feel like it just kind of walks you through. And I've created a workbook to go along with the book. And the workbook is laid out for families who are thinking about homeschooling. There's so many considerations when people are thinking about homeschooling. We're going to get to that in a second. There's so many considerations that go into choosing a curriculum because everybody wants to just jump in and choose a curriculum. And there's so many considerations, so many things you need to think about before you choose that curriculum. And so with the book together with the workbook, I really walk you through, as a parent, you've got worksheets, you've got things to fill out, because it really makes you sit down and think about things like, what is even the purpose of my homeschooling? Why am I homeschooling? Am I homeschooling because my child is behind? Because if you sit down and think about it, then you're choosing curriculum. Your curriculum choices are going to be around getting your child caught up. If you are homeschooling your kid because your kid is super advanced and the school's not meeting their needs, your curriculum choices are going to be set towards helping a gifted or advanced child re-engage in learning, because a lot of times kids who are advanced, or even children who are behind, the school treats those kids so differently. If you've got a kid who's behind, they've probably got really some self-esteem issues going on because they've been having these messages given to them at school that they're slow, they're behind, they're not smart. And so you've got to overcome a lot of that. So you're looking at curriculum from a totally different perspective than someone whose kid is ahead. They may have, the behind student may have disengaged because, why bother? I'm not smart. Whereas the advanced student may have disengaged because it's all boring. And so you're going to be looking at curriculum from a totally different perspective. If you've got a child who has medical issues, you're looking at curriculum again from a totally different perspective. You, at the end of the day, you just want your child to get better, right? And so you're looking at your curriculum totally differently. So that is one of the things that we go over in the workbook. You actually sit down and you fill out. I have several questions that I walk you through, so that you do these way before we get to the curriculum section, because you've got to think through these things before you even start looking at curriculum. And I can't stress how important it is that that parents walk through these things that you might not normally think about when you're homeschooling your kids, because first thing everybody thinks about is, oh my gosh, I got to choose a curriculum. And really, the curriculum is not the first place you want to go when you are looking to homeschool your kids. So I've put that, put the book together. I've got the workbook, and so that's who I am. And so I want to welcome you to my How to Start Homeschooling workshop. So let's just dive right into it. So hello to everybody who's joined us. Okay, so we're going to get started. So when you're first thinking about homeschooling, the first thing you have to do is obviously think about your homeschool laws. And I'm not going to delve into this a whole lot. I talk about it in the book. I talk about it in the workbook, how to figure out what your homeschool laws are. So I'm not going to really jump into that a lot here. But suffice it to say that the first thing you need to do is look at your homeschool laws and look at your, and so how do you do that? There are a couple of different ways, and I cover these in the book and in the workbook, but overall, you're gonna wanna look at two really good resources for you are the Homeschool Legal Defense Association website. they have an overview of all the states. And then, so once you go there, that's a very good resource. And then also going to your state Board of Education, a website. I mean, those are the two most reliable places. You can ask people online, you can do this, you can do that. But really, if you're going to look at the homeschool laws, if you're going to look at a law, you need to go to the source of the law. And the source of the law will be your state Board of Education website. So those are two places you go. And depending on where you live, if you look at the state site, Board of Education website or Department of Education website, whatever it's called in your state, once you go there, if they've mentioned that the local school system has some kind of say in your homeschooling, then you also need to go to your state or local, to your local Board of Education website. So it depends on the state. I'll walk you through that in the book and in the workbook, so I'm not going to jump into that because I know that that's not what people are here to learn about. When people think about homeschooling, the first thing they want to talk about is looking at curriculum and things like that. So we are not going to yet jump into curriculum. What we're going to talk about first is setting up your homeschool. And when I say setting up your homeschool, because this is really getting into the meat of what it is, what doing your homeschool is all about. What we're going to talk about is what kind of homeschool setup do you need? And so there are myriad ways to homeschool your child, right? So, and it really just depends on your family situation. So you don't have to quit your job. You can still homeschool. Really, what I tell everybody all the time is that the toughest job in homeschooling is finding daytime childcare, or if you work, childcare while you work. And so truly, once you have those two items checked off and dealt with, anyone can homeschool. Now you're going to have various degrees of, how really having to make it work. If you are working full time, you can still do it, but you've got to be really strict on your schedule. But the beautiful thing is, you don't have to homeschool on a school schedule. You can homeschool on a schedule that works for you and your child. So, so let's just jump into, let me pull my document up. Computer has crashed on me once today. Hopefully it won't crash on me again. Okay, here we are. So the first thing that you want to consider is, okay, what kind of time do I have? Okay, before you even think about curriculum, again, what kind of time do I have to homeschool? If you are a full-time stay-at-home all-day parent, then you've probably got a whole lot more time on your hands than a parent who is working part-time or full-time, okay? So the first thing you think about is what kind of time do you have on your hands? Because let me tell you what, if you're working full-time, like I'm talking 8 hours a day, the curriculum you probably don't want is one that requires a whole lot of you time, because there are curricula out there that require a whole lot of you. And so part of the reason why I quit doing school at home is because I found that a lot of the curriculum that's geared towards school at home people requires a lot of me time. It was requiring so much of my time. I was having to do a whole lot of reading, a whole lot of sitting down with the child. And I knew that because I had a business going, I was working, I was doing contract legal work. It just wasn't working for me. What was happening is my entire house was falling apart. I was spending so much time working and then having to spend so much time with the children when I wasn't working that I didn't cook, I didn't get the house clean. It was a mess. And so literally it was a mess. And so I had to stop doing that. I was trying to implement a full-time classical education at home, and it just didn't work because of the amount of time that's required with that kind of curriculum. So I had to do something else. And so that's how I kind of went the opposite direction when I went to an unschooling environment, because unschooling is very, it's child-centered. You just kind of flow with the child. But I found that for me, in order for me to feel better, I needed a little bit more structure. And I definitely had a child who needed more structure. So what I've ended up is finding something in between that I can implement around my business when I'm working my business schedule, and also that I feel good about that I have, because I have to check off some boxes, because that's just me. So I've got enough, I can check off enough boxes to make me happy, but I'm not having to check off so many boxes, and the children have more freedom and autonomy. And so I found something that works for me. And so that's the beauty of homeschooling, guys. I'm saying all this, and it may be confusing because you probably want to know, be told what to do, but these are considerations that you have to go through. And so this is part of the reason why I put the workbook together, so that you could kind of go through it. Really forces you to go through, and you're filling out things, and it's really forcing you to think about what it is you have to give, what kind of time you have. And so you can use this workbook for this year. Next year might be totally different, because your family situation might be totally different. And so you kind of go through the analysis again, and based on what you come out with, it kind of helps you narrow down your curriculum choices, because not all curriculum choices are for everybody. So the first thing you have to do is think about what curriculum choice, what your time is. So if you know that you're working full time and you don't have the time to implement something that's going to take a great deal of time, then you can cut out a whole bunch of curriculum when you're talking to people, and you can say, I need something that I can get done in 2 or 3 hours a day. And that's often not a classical curriculum, because it's very literature rich. It's an awesome curriculum. But if you're low on time, on you time, it may not be the best curriculum to implement with younger children who will need your help, okay? You might be able, if you have an independent older child who can do it on their own with minimal involvement from you, perhaps. But again, these are considerations that you have to take into consideration. So let's look at the types of homeschool. I think I might be about to get a visitor. Yes, I am about to get a visitor. This is Shiloh the cat. Here she is. So anyway, so let's talk about what are the types of homeschool. So depending on, close the door. Close the door. So depending on your time or your resources or your travel schedule, depending on all of those things, these different types of homeschool may be appealing to you. So I'm actually going to go through them. So the first one is 100% online public school. People like the 100% online public school often because you can be completely hands-off, and it's usually free, and you're provided with all of your books, and the kids show up to class. It's just online instead of being in the actual brick and mortar school. It's totally in line with the public school, what they're teaching. And so people are pulling their kid out for just a year or so, and they know they're going to put them back in public school. They will often choose an online public school curriculum so that their child doesn't miss a beat. So the pros of 100% online public school are, if you're going to put your kid right back in school, they're kind of still on the same testing schedule. They're still learning the same curriculum, the same material that the local public school is doing. They have, they provide you with the books, they provide you with everything. And a lot of them will provide you even with a computer. And so really all you have to do as a parent is simply facilitate your child showing up. So 100% online public school is good for people who know they're putting their kid right back in public school, people who are working full time. Or even people who are working part-time. The only thing those people would have to do is find a place for their child to be during the school hours, because they pretty much track with regular school hours. And so if you're working during that time, you would have to have somebody, who's babysitting your kid, who can just make sure they're showing up for class on time. So those are the pros for that kind of school. The cons are that if you pulled your child out of school because they're behind or because they're advanced, it's going to be just like regular public school. They're not going to go any slower. They're not going to go any faster than they would do in a public school. So you basically have what you just pulled your kid out of at home. Another con is is not very flexible. So if you're looking to homeschool because you're looking for flexibility, 100% online public school is not going to be a solution for you, because again, it tracks the school. You have the same, attendance requirements. You have, hello. You have the same attendance requirements. You have the same everything requirements, the testing requirements. Everything's pretty much the same. Everything pretty much tracks the same. So if you pulled your kid out of public school because public school isn't working, public school online is probably going to run into some of the same issues. If you just pull them out because you need to get your kids away from a certain group of folks at school, but you're okay with the public school, then you'd be okay. So those are kind of the pros and cons of public school online. Then there's 100% online private school. So with an online private school, clearly there's a cost, but there are lots of there are online public schools for every budget. You've got some that are relatively inexpensive at a couple $100s a year, and versus they can run into the tens of thousands of dollars. And so it really runs the gamut. So the similar pros to online public school, except of course a cost is associated with it. And you do have to purchase your equipment and all that stuff. But one pro with the private school, online private school over online public school, is that they often tend to be more flexible. So you'll have more flexibility than you will with an online public school. So for example, I know people whose children are into acting, or they're athletes, and they're doing various things that they want to just be able to get their work done. They don't want a bunch of busy work. They just want to get it done. And so with an online private school, you typically have more flexibility. So I know people who, I know a woman whose daughter performs on Broadway. And so she will actually spend 6 months of her year when the season is off, and she'll get her entire year's worth of schoolwork done in those 6 months, so that the 6 months of the year when she is working, she doesn't have to worry about school at all. A private school, they'll do learning style assessment, and some of them will cater the instruction around the child's learning style. So it just depends on the private school that you find, but you can find a lot more flexibility in an online private school than you typically will in an online public school. But again, these are good for people who wanted to pull their kids out of school because the parent needs to work. Public school wasn't working, but they like a private school environment. Also, as with the public school, you can pretty much do an online school from anywhere in the world. And so those are the pros. The cons for an online private school, because they're more flexible than public school, it's not as many cons, but it's still more of a structured school environment. So if you're looking to get away from a structured school environment, you might not like it. Also, one of the good things with the public school and the private school online is they will often try to have activities for families that live together in a certain area, so that your kid can get out and meet some friends that are kind of in the same course as they are. So both private school and public schools will attempt to do that to a certain extent. And but one of the cons, one of the benefits of having a less structured homeschooling environment is that you can take advantage of homeschooling opportunities. Where I live in the Atlanta metro area, and there are literally multiple activities that your homeschooled child could do every single day. But they're during the day. And so one of the drawbacks to the online options is if you have to show up at a class at a certain time every single day, it can cut down on your ability to be able to engage in some of the homeschooling activities that are available during the day. So those are just kind of pros and cons of the online public and private school. So let's see, the next one is hybrid. So in many metro areas, you will find hybrid homeschool. So depending on where you are, depending on the grade your kid is. A hybrid homeschool is where a child will go to school for maybe 3 full days or 2 full days and 1 half day. So it's kind of like on a university model where you'll find they will, during those times, that's when they get their instruction, that's when they do their testing, that's when they do everything they need. And then during the week, then you as a parent simply facilitate their ability to get the work done. So this is a really great option for parents who are working who have to work part-time and who, they can work their work schedule around the days that their child is in school. It's also good because the child is in the school environment. A lot of people really think it's important for a child to be in a classroom environment. So that your child gets the classroom environment, but it's not all day, every day. Another pro is often these hybrid programs will have sports teams, bands, drama clubs, things that you would typically find in a traditional all-day school, but it's only part-time. And so, since they're off 2 to 2.5 days per week, then they get the opportunity to be off during the times when the homeschool programs are being offered around town. And so you can still take advantage. So it's kind of really the best. A lot of people find it really the best of both worlds. The cons to a hybrid homeschool are, there's a cost associated. And again, they can range from a few $100s a year to, thousands and multiple thousands of dollars a year. So, that cost is associated with this, but it's really kind of the best of both worlds, especially for a parent who can work their part-time or full-time work schedule around the days that the child is in school and still be able to work and still be able to take advantage of the numerous homeschool opportunities that are out there. So that's kind of a hybrid homeschool, and it just depends on where you live. If you live in a large metropolitan area, there likely are hybrid homeschools in your area to look at. All right, let me see. The next one is you can have a tutor do the teaching for you. So I know here again, Metro Atlanta's it's several million people in the metro area, so there's pretty much everything here. And I know these things are not available everywhere. However, and depending on your state laws, you may or may not be able to do this. But I do know around here, cottage schools are popping up where you've got a former teacher, certified teacher, who's decided to go home and home educate her own children. And then, a neighbor finds out and says, hey, can you homeschool my kid too? And the next thing you know, this teacher's got, 4 or 5 kids in her little cottage school. And so you can find opportunities like that. I know people who have 2 working parents whose child just needed to get out of the school environment. And they simply asked someone who they knew who was homeschooling if she could homeschool for them. And they tried it for a semester, and now they've been doing it for years. There are opportunities where you can hire yourself, find a tutor who can tutor your child for you. And so that tutor/nanny would be responsible for, educating the child as well as getting them to the homeschool activities. So that's another option if you don't want to do the homeschooling yourself, but you do want to pull your child out of the homeschooling environment. That is another option, hiring a tutor or/nanny to do it for you. So I've kind of covered 4 options so far. Oh, phone's ringing. I've covered 4 options thus far on, actually, let me go grab that. Make sure it's not my husband. Can I get it? Yeah. Oh, here. Can you turn that off and bring it to me, please? It's not Dad, is it? Okay, can you bring the phone? Bring it to me. Just a sec. Thank you. Okay, so you can go back and do your work now, please. So yes, this is the fun thing that you get to do when you're at home with your children all day. So I've covered 4 options that you have where you can work and homeschool your child. And so a lot of people are under the misconception that in order to homeschool your child, you have to be a full-time stay-at-home parent. And it just isn't true, right? And so, and I'm going off this list. I'm going off this list off my, off just a page in my workbook. So that all these different types of schools. So, so that's what I'm looking at on the screen here. So we've got 4 options, guys, for a parent who feels like they don't have the patience to homeschool their kid. All of these homeschool options that I've covered so far do not involve you as a parent homeschooling your own kid, but it does allow you to pull your child out of the school environment if it's not working for your child. And then the other thing that I hear from people all the time is, oh, I can't quit my job. You know, I have to work. We have to be a 2-income family, or I'm a single parent and I can't quit my job. Well, the 4 options that I just covered do not involve quitting a job, okay? It just involves being creative and finding out childcare, really, or if you can operate your work schedule around, you know, the hybrid or around the school day. You can still, your child can still homeschool. You don't have to do it. You can still work, right? So with the online public school, online private school, the hybrid, or hiring a tutor, you haven't changed your work schedule at all. Or maybe you have a little bit, but you're still working. Okay, so I just want to emphasize that for people because it is one of the biggest concerns people have. So now let's jump into what people typically think of when they think of homeschooling. And that is the traditional, I'm going to get a curriculum and I'm going to implement it myself. Okay, so let's talk about that. So traditional homeschooling with some outside co-ops, right? So this is what I do. So I actually we just pulled out of the co-op we were in, but we're looking for another one. So this is what I do. I have gone to the homeschool conventions. I have done my research online, and I have, you know, chosen the curriculum that I think is best for my kid, and then I supplement with co-op. And so again, large metro area, lots of co-ops around here. So just this past semester, one child was taking an art class at a co-op, and another child was taking a writing class and aerospace science class. And then I was doing the rest. I was doing math, I was doing science, history, and then some other, and they do science. It's which I'll get to this, where you take some online classes. So they take Spanish online, which they still do take Spanish online through Homeschool Spanish Academy. The teachers are native speakers. They're from Guatemala. And so it's an excellent program. I love that they get to talk to and exchange culture with people who are in another country, but they're native speakers, and they're very patient. And so I love that. So in my homeschool, I teach some myself with curricula that I bought. They take, a couple of co-op classes, and then they take an online class. And so that's kind of what you think of when you think of traditional homeschooling. It's so flexible, guys. It's so flexible. You find what you need. You can't, if you want a box curriculum, but you can't find everything you want in that box, then there are other places you can get what you need for your child. And so really what you need as a parent is an ability to find what you need. You don't have to have the ability, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be able to teach everything. The only thing you need, the biggest skill you need as a homeschooling parent is to be able to find what you need. Once you can find what you need, you can put it together. And I say it's simple as that, because it's not simple. Having your children with you, around the clock, if you're doing traditional homeschooling, you will need a break. But really, it really boils down to you as a parent being intentional, being innovative, and finding what you need. That's all you need in order to be able to homeschool. So you can do traditional schooling with some outside co-ops. You can do traditional schooling with some online, as I've explained. As my son's going into, we're doing pre-algebra right now, and as he goes into algebra 1, I'm not going to teach it. I don't want to teach it. I probably could, but we will either find a co-op, a tutor, or an online class for him to take for his math going forward. And then once he gets to high school, we've got the additional option of dual enrollment. We've got the additional option of using edX, which he can take math classes from universities and schools all around the world through edX, and he can count those as his high school credit. And some of them may allow him to clep out of his college math, so he doesn't even have to take it. So there are that's like 6 options right there for high school math, none of which involve mama teaching it, right? And so that's the beauty of homeschooling. You have such flexibility to do what needs to be done for your family, and all you have to do is be able to bring the right pieces in to where they go. Slot the right pieces in to create your homeschool. Okay. All right. So the next option is traditional with online and co-ops. And then the last option is doing 100% homeschooling, where you don't use any outside resources, where you as a parent, you're doing everything. This might be, and I won't even say it's for an unschooler, because unschoolers typically, unschoolers are masters at finding resources and finding real world experiential opportunities for their children. And so, so those are all the options, guys. So the first 4 options that I mentioned are very well suited for someone who does not want to stop working or cannot stop working. You can even do the second 4. If you're working, you simply have to do these things around your schedule. So I've met people who have only homeschooled on Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday because they worked full time Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I have met people who homeschool in the evenings when they get home. So their kids, they may have a grandma or somebody come over. So their schedule is a little lopsided, if you will. So the kids go to bed late, and so they sleep late. So when mom gets home, say at 3, they're just kind of getting up and getting going because they didn't get up till 12 or 1. And then they get their homeschooling done in the evening. And so again, it's just so flexible. The possibilities are endless, and they're as varied as the number of families that are homeschooling. No 2 homeschools look alike. And so you cannot compare what, your grandma's cousin's sister is doing, because her situation, his situation, that family situation is probably totally different from yours. And so when you think of homeschooling, you've got to think of what works for you. Okay. So that's kind of, when I say how to start homeschooling, the workbook really helps you work yourself through the things that I've just talked about, so that you can decide, really what kind of curriculum works best for you. Because if you've decided that I really want flexibility, but I really need to structure, and I really don't want to homeschool the kids, but we need to be flexible because we travel, we do things, we just like to be able to do stuff, but I need the structure of an actual school environment. My kid's going to play, ball in college, so I really need an NCAA approved transcript. I don't want to have to go back and forth with the school about that. Online private school might be perfect for you. And so if you've gone through this analysis that I've just taken you through, then, and that I take you through in the workbook, then you already know, oh my gosh, I don't even have to look at the box curriculum because I'm not doing it. I don't have to look at this. I don't have to look at this. All I'm looking at are NCAA approved online private schools. And that brings your curriculum madness in. Instead of looking at all of this, you're really only looking at this. And so if I decide that, and I'll get into this in a second, if I decide I only want secular curriculum, that means instead of looking at all of this, you're only looking at this. And so that's why it's so important for you to go through the analysis of, why are you homeschooling? If you're homeschooling a child who's maybe behind and who really needs help catching up, you likely don't want to do 100% online homeschooling, because children who have struggled in school often need a lot. And to just get say my kid's in 5th grade, I think he's behind, so I'm going to make him repeat 5th grade. He might be 2nd grade in some things. He might be 6th grade in some things. He might be all over the board. And so getting a 5th grade curriculum to repeat may or may not be the best thing. And so that helps me segue into, you need to do this analysis on why are you homeschooling? You need to do an analysis on, so we've talked about why we're homeschooling, and the next analysis has to be, what kind of time do I have? Truly, what can I do in homeschooling my child? Okay, if I know that I just can't do anything where I'm having to implement or teach myself, then that puts me in the first 4 categories. I'm either finding a hybrid, I'm getting a tutor, I'm doing online private, I'm doing online public, right? If you have a child who needs flexibility, you're going to have to look at an online private school. Online public school is likely not going to meet a child whose needs are up and down depending on the subject. Okay, so now that I've kind of decided, okay, this is where I want to be, before you now choose curriculum, you need to do an assessment of your child. And I recommend this to everybody. For whatever reason you're pulling your child out of school, they've had assessments, and they may have been good or they may have been bad. But you as a parent need to understand where your child is. And so my recommendation is to also do an assessment, do an independent assessment. This assessment can have very different forms, and I go over all the forms in the workbook, but I'm going to briefly go over them here. First thing you do, standardized testing. So BJU Publishing, Seton Testing, a couple of other places offer homeschool testing. So if you're homeschooling, you can have your child can either test online, they can do the online testing, of the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, the Stanford Achievement Test, the California Achievement Test. There are other tests that your child can do online, or if some of them have a degree requirement, if you do have a degree, you can implement the paper and pencil test yourself in your home. And so that's actually what I choose to do, because my children don't do as well in an online setting as they do in a pen and paper. So I implement the testing here at my house. What you need to do is assess your child. If your child is an advanced learner, you might not even know it, because they have disengaged so much at school that they just don't even try anymore. So you might be getting negative feedback from the parent, from the teacher telling your child is behind. And actually, once you do your own assessment, you might find out your child is not behind at all. They're just bored and disengaged. And so when you do your own independent assessment in a low-key environment, low-stress environment, if your child has test anxiety, do a test that doesn't require timing. When you do your own assessment that's not in a school setting, you may very well find that you get very different information than what you're getting from the school. So I recommend everybody who is bringing their kids home to homeschool them to do an independent assessment. So you can do standardized testing. You can use store-bought workbooks. Just go down to Barnes & Noble and get some, grade appropriate workbooks, and spend the first, month or two going through one of those fat workbooks that covers all the subjects, and see where your child is. Get the grade you think your kid's going into, or the grade your kid is in, because that's how you can find the gaps. Because often, even a child who stays in school all through K through 12, it's going to have gaps in some places. They found ways to cope. They found ways around it. But pretty much every child who's been in school is going to have some gaps somewhere. And so you can do an independent assessment that way. Just work through one of those fat notebooks for a month or two, see where they are. And then you know where to start looking for your curriculum. Because you might find that, Johnny is actually a couple grade levels ahead in math, but he is maybe a grade or two below in another subject, and he's right on in this subject. So if you have a child who's all over the place like that, then when you look for curriculum that you're going to have to pick and choose. You're not going to be able to get a box curriculum for 5th grade if he's ranging from 2nd to 7th grade in your independent assessment. So I hope this is making sense for everybody. What I'm saying, because this is why when I tell people curriculum is like kind of way down there on the line when you're thinking about homeschooling, this is why. Because there are so many things that go into choosing a curriculum so that you can really have a good school year than just choosing curriculum. It's like really number 4 or 5 down the road. So another way that you can, if you look at if you see a curriculum that you like, a lot of the box curricula or even some of the standalone curricula will have an online placement test so that you can have your child kind of do the placement test, and then it will tell you, it'll give a recommendation as to what grade you should choose for that particular subject. Those are really good if you found a curriculum you think you like. But you can have a private assessment, obviously. So a school psychologist or regular psychologist can assess your child, or you can create your own assessment. So there are many, many ways. There are online worksheets you can print out. There are many ways for you to independently assess your child, and I go over all those in the workbook. And you've got a spot here to record all your findings, and you're doing all of this stuff before you choose curriculum, right? And so then when you're looking at curriculum, let's look at curriculum types. So I've got a sheet here where you kind of cross off what you don't want. And then you're left with kind of a narrowing down of the possibilities when you're looking for curriculum. So let's talk about curriculum. Now I've got on here, so I did a deep dive into curriculum on another video, on one of my live videos here in the group. So if you need more with curriculum, I want you to go to look for that video, and in fact, I'll link to it in one of the comments when I get done, so that you can go back and listen to the deep dive of curriculum, right? So, but right now, so we've got religious versus secular. Some people want to find curriculum that's from a Christian worldview. And so if you know that, then you can cross out secular here, because you don't want secular. So that means so now we were out here, all the curriculum in the world. Then we've narrowed it down. Okay, I know that I want, a box curriculum. Okay, so because I know I don't want online, and I know I don't want to hire a tutor, so that brought it in here. And I know I don't want a hybrid. So okay, so now I know that I don't want secular. So now I'm narrowing it down a little bit more. Do I want a structured curriculum, or do I want a curriculum that has a lot of flexibility and creativity? Okay, if I want structured versus creativity and play out in the woods, and then I don't like that, I'm not into that, I just want to be able to get it done, boom, boom, boom. I don't want a whole lot of decision making. I want something that's got a script that tells me exactly what to do. I know I've got to do these 5 things every day, and once I'm done, I'm done. Okay, so guess what? You've just narrowed it down even more, right? Okay, do you want hands-on materials? Especially when it comes to math. Some math is just very straightforward and boring and vanilla, like it was when we all went to school. And that's okay, because frankly, that's the curriculum that I have, because I found that trying to have something that had a bunch of manipulatives that is just trying to do too much, I couldn't do it. And so you have to know that as you know, you have to think about it can be the most shiny curriculum in the world. Everybody in the world could recommend it. But if it's not going to work for you, you're not going to implement it. You're going to waste money on it. So, so just all of these things in this workbook are here for you to think about what works for you. And so you've got to think about it. I don't care how shiny and beautiful it is. If it doesn't work for you, if it's not going to work for your child, it's not going to work. So when you're looking at curriculum, do not look at, go ahead and look at what people recommend. But if you know that, you know what, I'm not that organized, I'm going to have pieces all over the house, I'm not even going to know where half the pieces to this program are, just pass on it and find something that's vanilla, that's in a book, and it's okay. It's totally okay. You have to do what works best for you. Okay, and last thing, again, talking about math, do you want spiral curriculum versus mastery? I chose two different highly recommended curricula that I learned. I didn't understand. I never heard of spiral versus mastery, but they're both spiral curricula. I couldn't do it. Could not do it. Spiral kind of covers, like, you might cover 5 different things in a lesson. You might, if you're covering the number 5, you might write the number 5, you might count to the number 5, you might learn to count 5 pennies, you'll learn to measure 5 inches, and you might also look at a nickel, because that's 5, and you might talk about left and right. And then, so spiral is like, think of a spiral notebook, where you kind of go out, and then you come back in to the notebook. You go out and you come back in. So spiral will cover several different subjects very in a very shallow way, but it goes back and covers it over and over again while adding a little bit more, adding more subjects, and it keeps going out and back and out and back. I couldn't do spiral. A lot of school curricular spiral, because they say kids forget stuff, so they have to keep going back over and over it. If you've got a gifted child, a spiral curriculum will drive them insane, because gifted children often get it very quickly, and they don't need to do a whole lot of review. They don't want to do, a whole lot of review, and it will be maddening, and they won't want to do it, and you won't understand why. That's why. So spiral versus math or mastery. So mastery is basically how we learn growing up. Everything you learn, 1 through 10 is 1 through 10. When you're working on the number 1, you're just working on counting to 1, or counting to 5. You're doing 5. You're counting to 5, and you're writing the number 5. Once you've mastered that, you move on to the number 6. And so mastery is more everything builds on each other. So I don't really understand the concept of forgetting it, since it kind of builds on each other. But that's kind of the reason why they came out with spiral, because they said it forces the child to review the stuff over and over again. And so by the time you get to the bottom of the spiral, you've covered everything to the depth of mastery. You just covered it in little bitty pieces over and over and over again. So it just really depends. And you really have to look at, I recommend going to a homeschool convention near you, so you can look at the materials, touch, feel, flip through, and see what works for you, because what works for one person is not going to work for another. What works for your child's not going to work for another child. And I have to tell you that what I found is, when it comes to whether it works for me or my child, I definitely have to get something that works for me. Because if it doesn't work for me in the way my brain thinks, I'm not going to implement it, and I'm going to end up not using it. So I went through 2 math curricula before I found Singapore math, and that's what I did. And so now my daughter, who's in 5th grade, is still in Singapore. My son is doing art of problem solving. He did Beast Academy. My daughter will not be doing Beast Academy. But what I found is that she probably would have done better with the spiral curriculum. Been there, done that. I couldn't do it. So I simply had to find a way to make Singapore math, which is mastery, work for her. And so, so that's what I had to do, because I I can't do spiral. So it just depends on who you are and what works for you. So now like I said, we've kind of narrowed the curriculum type. So if you go through this exercise, if you go through the exercise of thinking about why you're homeschooling, if you go through the exercise of thinking about why why you've pulled your kid out of school, if you go through the exercise of thinking what you realistically have time for and realistically how you want to homeschool, how you want to do it. And then if you go through the exercise of assessing your child, then you go through this exercise of narrowing down what kind of curriculum is going to work for you. Once you have gone through all of these things, you will find that the curriculum search is not as overwhelming. And at a minimum, you're not out there asking people, hey, I've got a fourth grader, what's a good fourth grade curriculum? I mean, that's like, it's like asking, I don't know. It's such a broad question. And as I say in the video about curriculum, it's like if you go into a large library, think of every book on that shelf as a different curriculum. There are that many curricula out there. And so to ask someone which one is the best of all of those is really not a good question. So you need to at least let people know, yeah, so I'm looking for a curriculum that's in the young adult section, that's in the mystery section, that's in the, or that's in the history section, but it's in the historical fiction section. So, you've gone from I'm looking in the whole library to I'm looking in young adult to I'm looking in history to I'm looking in historical fiction. And so that's kind of what I'm helping you do within the workbook to narrow it down so that you're not just looking at everything, because this is too overwhelming. It's too overwhelming. And the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get frustrated and you're going to be taking recommendations from 50 different people, and they're going to have 50 different recommendations, and you'll end up buying stuff that doesn't work, and you won't know why. And you'll be angry because you paid all the money for it and you want to implement it anyway. And then you'll find your whole homeschool is not working and you'll be tempted to put your kid back in school. So, I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And so I'm simply trying to help you to hit that off on the front end. So that is choosing curriculum. All right, so let's talk about deschooling. Here's one of the things that you might hear about deschooling, and in the workbook I kind of give you a list of several things that you can do to deschool. Here's Judy's philosophy on deschooling. I think that if your child has been in school, has been in a traditional school environment their entire school career, then you probably need to spend some time deschooling them, which means basically reprogramming their little brains, and including your brain, reprogramming what you think of as what school is supposed to be. I cautioned you at the very beginning against trying to implement a school at home environment. And so this is when both you and your children will spend time reevaluating what school really is. I submit that what you're doing is educating your child, or helping facilitate your child's learning, helping facilitate your child's education. That is what you're doing. And so in order to do that, you've got to get your child engaged. Children are born to want to learn. Children are born to want to suck in everything about their environment. And it's often the school environment that kind of stifles that creativity and that curiosity, because they're told in school that this is what they have to learn and that nothing outside of these books or nothing outside of this test is worth learning. And so if they've had years and years of that, then they're kind of programmed to think that way. And so this whole we're going to teach a love of learning. Show me a school that has taught their student body a love of learning. Typically, it's quite the opposite. They've taught their children, what the kids have learned is how to cope and how to get by and how to work the system. But whether they've actually acquired a love of learning, again, show me a school that has actually instilled that in their student body. So what you are doing is, again, reprogramming yourself as well as your children on exactly what it means to learn and to educate oneself. And so what you're wanting to do with deschooling is get your child engaged. Re-engage your child. I say re-engage your child because they were engaged at one point. Re-engage your child with their environment and re-engage your child, reconnect your child with wanting to learn. So how do we do that? Every child has an interest, and a lot of people say, well, my kid's only interest is video games. Well, you know what my answer to that is? We're done with the video games. And I know that may sound harsh and it may sound authoritarian, but at the end of the day, our children are meant to be creative and to be imaginative and to be engaged in their environment to come up with solutions. I mean, think of all the people in history who came up with solutions to problems, to world problems, and they're not going to likely do that sitting behind a video game controller all the time. Now, do my kids play video games? Absolutely. They're allowed to play them on the weekends. They don't play them during the week. And they have to play, they have an hour on and an hour off. And then that only is so for a max number of hours. So, but no video games during the week, and pretty much no electronics during the week. So what that requires then is they've got to figure out how to entertain themselves in between or after their schoolwork. And the whole concept of I'm bored just doesn't fly. So here are some ideas for deschooling your child. Of course, one of the big things I always say to people is, go to a museum, go to a nature center, go to any place in your community, even if it's an hour drive. If you're homeschooling, you're going to learn, you're going to have to drive. You drive 3 hours for opportunities to learn, and that's okay. Even if you don't live near someplace and you have to drive, that's all right. So, what are you going to do? How are you going to help your kids? Take them to a museum, take them to the nature center. And before you go, every museum, nature center, they will typically have an online teacher's guide, an education guide, where you can go online before you go on your trip, and you can read about the exhibits that they have there. You can read about what you'll see. A lot of them will have hands-on activities for teachers to do with their kids, with their students. You can do with your kids. Hands-on activities that you can do beforehand, kind of just advanced learning, advanced engagement for the venue. And then what this does is once you get to the venue, if the child already has familiarity with it, then once you go to the exhibit, they're going to be automatically more engaged. They're not just walking through the gallery looking at stuff. And then once you get into the gallery, some of the online teacher's guides will have activities to do beforehand. They'll have activities to do, maybe a scavenger hunt or something to do while you're there, which again, get your child engaged, gets the dialogue going. You're talking about the exhibits. You're not just blowing through the gallery. You're actually reading the plaques, and you're actually discussing the plaques, and you're discussing it. You might even have to look up some stuff while you're in there. You might have your scavenger hunt that helps you think through things. That's kind of how you take a museum field trip now. And so a museum trip that may have taken you an hour to get through before might take you 3 or 4 hours. And that's a day's work. You've probably covered language arts, you've probably covered history, science, you've probably covered everything. You haven't sat there and read a book or written on a piece of paper, but you have engaged your child, you've had discussions, the synapses are starting to fire, and your child has just spent a whole day of learning, and they haven't opened a book. But you've reconnected them, you've re-engaged them in the world around them. And so the same thing you can do, the same thing with, get science project books where they can do fun science projects at home. Netflix has so many documentaries. If you've got an older child, if you've got a child who's interested in any topic, you can find between Amazon Prime and Netflix and Hulu, you can find all kinds of documentaries for your child to watch. Okay, they can watch it, not just watch it though. Maybe after they've watched it, maybe find a part of it that they found particularly interesting. And so now they can do some research online, or you can go to the library. And the library is a huge resource. Go to the library and do some follow-up research. Maybe have them write to you about it. Oh my gosh, they just wrote a paper. So again, none of this has anything to do with the school book. None of this has anything to do with a curriculum. None of this has to do with anything that looks like what they do at school, what your child is learning. And so when I talk about deschooling, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about spending some time to re-engage, reconnect your child to the world of learning, and to introduce your child, if they haven't had this experience before, to introduce them to the world of being self-directed. And because that's really the goal. The goal, in my opinion, of homeschooling is to develop a child who is self-directed and who wants to direct their own education into whatever it is their passions are, because that is when they'll truly thrive. Instead of trying to have cookie cutter kids coming out of the schools, you can have a child who has experienced and who has really spent a lot of time pursuing his or her interests, so that if they do go to college, they're not 2 years in and they still have no idea what they want to major in. Or you've got a kid who's decided they don't want to go to college at all, they just want to get a certificate or a coding certificate and go straight into the workforce. Or you have another child who really likes to work with their hands, and they really just want to go get a trade and start their own business that way, or start a career that way. And so there are so many things that you can pursue during your deschooling, and this will also inform you of your child's learning style. And so this is why deschooling is very, very important, because you will discover through observation how your child learns best, right? You will discover if your child is really a hands-on person, someone who really likes to do stuff with their hands. They weren't really allowed to do that when they were in school. But through having the downtime where they have to occupy themselves, and you're following up on things that they like to do, things that they're interested in, you will discover, deschooling is really a discovery phase for parents. And so you will discover what your child likes to do, and you can kind of move them. Because if you ask them, especially if you ask a kid who's been in school, they're just gonna say, I don't know. And so by doing this deschooling, you can discover through observation, does my kid learn better reading stuff? Does my kid learn better just by hearing stuff? Does my kid learn better by using their hands? Or does my kid learn better with the combination of all of those? You will become informed as you work through your deschooling. I've got several things on this list here in the workbook on ways that you can deschool. But there are numerous ways that you can deschool in order to reprogram the brain, help you to observe your child. And if you wait until after the deschooling process to buy your curriculum, you'll be able to narrow that curriculum bubble down even more. Because if you've got an audio learner, then you know that once you've narrowed it down where you thought you had narrowed it down before, now you know that you want to find things that are really good for audio learners. Or if you've got a learner who really needs to have several senses engaged in their learning, then you might have to suck it up and get that heavily manipulative curriculum, because that's how your child is going to learn best. And so for me, the deschooling process is all about discovery. It's all about learning who your child is, and it's all about reprogramming for both parents and child about what learning truly is. Because at the end of the day, if your child knows how to learn, then they can learn anything. It's, so that's in deschooling, you're teaching your child how to learn and how to pursue knowledge on their own. Right? All right, so the last thing we're going to cover is socialization. And so this is the big one, and this is what people are always concerned about. This is whenever you have a couple who wants to homeschool, and there's one person in the couple who wants to homeschool and the other one who's adamantly against it. It's almost 100% because of these socialization issues. So to that, I'm going to say it is a real concern. And if you're homeschooling, you must be intentional in getting your child out there and in getting them, getting around people. Okay, so I've said that piece. Now, let me tell you what the reality is. The reality is that if you're homeschooling, your children are likely with you a lot. And they might be with you while you're conducting business. They might be with you while you're talking to customers. My kids sit here and listen to me talk to people on the phone all the time. They don't know it, but I can hear them right outside that door right there. They're supposed to be doing the work, but they're not, clearly. But they're listening to every word I'm saying, and that's fine. But we're out of this house all the time. We're going to, they've got their co-ops, they've got their, they're interacting with the ladies in Guatemala who are teaching them. They are interacting with the people at the grocery store. They're interacting with people every place that we go. And so they are around people other than myself pretty much every day. They both play sports. We are joining the Beta Club next year. They're about to do a junior achievement class where they'll take classes every week, and it'll culminate in them spending a day at the junior achievement facility where they'll run their own business. And it's really, really cool. And so, they're participating in all manner of things. And like I said some time ago, in a large metro area like this, there are literally multiple things every single day for homeschoolers. And so what I would say for me, the big key with socialization is finding the same group of kids for your kids to be around all the time, because you can go to different field trips and you might find different people at different field trips. And so where are places that kids can find other kids, kind of the same group of kids? Joining a co-op, neighborhood, relatives, the park. If you go to the park fairly regularly, you kind of get to learn who the regulars are. You can exchange numbers with the nannies or with the parents who are out there with them. So you kind of tag team so you can come at the same time. My kids are involved in sports, but there are clubs, there's 4-H, there are libraries have events, there are numerous, volunteer work. There, just like you go out of the house every day and you interact with people all day, every day, such can be the life of a homeschooler, but you must be intentional. You must set an intention, and one of the things that I have in my notebook is I have you write down, what you're going to do every week. It requires planning. It does require planning. It does require being organized. And so that's one of the really great things about the workbook, is that it really helps you to stay on track, and it really forces you to think through this stuff. And so if you've got somebody, if you're wanting to homeschool, you want somebody to homeschool and they're not wanting to do it, or vice versa, I'm going to highly recommend purchasing my stress-free guide to start homeschooling your child. And so I've got a link about it. I've got a link to it in the description of this video. But if you or somebody you know is wanting to start homeschooling, you cannot find a better resource than this workbook. And if you want to get the book to accompany it, even better, because they're really meant to work together, but each one is standalone. But the workbook will literally walk you through every single step that you need to do and walk you through all those considerations that nobody really tells you about. When who's telling you to assess your child independently? And so it'll walk you through all the things that you need to do when you're thinking about homeschooling your child. It'll walk you through everything. It'll really make you sit and think. Now, if you just want to run out there and find some curriculum to buy, then that's okay. But if you really want to be intentional, if you really want to be thoughtful, if you really want to get your homeschooling off on the right foot, you take advantage of purchasing this workbook. It's $35. So, the $35, the amount of money it can save in the book together with it, the book by itself is $15. So both of them together are $50. So that $50 that you spend on the front end will save you hundreds of hours in time and hundreds of dollars in money, real money, because you will have thought through your homeschool. You will have sat down with it, and you would have thought through all of these different considerations that must go into, that you must take under consideration before you start homeschooling. Because if you don't, what can end up happening is you jump out there, you purchase a curriculum, it doesn't work. So now you've spent money on your curriculum. You realize, I don't have time to do this. So now you've either got to look for something else, or try to cram it down your kid's throat, or force yourself to do it, or you just give up and throw in the towel and say, oh, homeschooling didn't work for me. And so I see that happening to so many people. And that's why it really, I've been really blessed in being able to homeschool my children. I enjoy homeschooling my children. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't send them back to school. And so I want to bring that to people. And then it breaks my heart when I hear people say they've got to put their kids back in school because they're not going to be able to, because the homeschooling didn't work out for them. Because often the reason why it didn't work out is because they didn't spend this time really thinking through on the front end what they were doing and how to do it. And it's just like with anything else. You have to be methodical. You have to think it through. And so with my workbook, I'm really helping people to think through and get through everything. Make sure they're on the right track. Make sure they're doing the things that work for them and their family, because what works for other people doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. I don't care how much you like. My bestie, who's actually in this group, my bestie and I homeschool differently. And she and I are so much alike. But we homeschool differently. We have different philosophies. So we do some things alike, but we do things differently too. And so so that's why, you look at, I've recommended some stuff to her that she liked. I recommended some stuff to her that she's like, no way is that going to work for me. And so that's one of those things. And so if you think through these things on the front end, then when you're implementing your homeschool, it's going to make it so much better. It's going to be so much easier because you truly will have customized your home education for your family and for your children and for you. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and I will respond to any questions you have. And If I need to cover something in a little bit more in depth, we'll see what the comments come back at to see if I need to come back and add some to this. But I really wanted to give you a basic overview, and I'm sorry it went a little long. I try to keep my lives to about 45 minutes, so we're actually way long. But anyway, I just want to make sure I covered kind of really the bulk of what you need in order to get up and get going homeschooling with confidence, and in a way that's not going to have you burned out or second guessing yourself, 3-6 months down the road. Okay, so thank you so much, and I just want to again remind you, I've got a link to the workbook in the description of this video, so click on that link and check it out, and I will we'll see you guys next time.